Welcome to our webinar today, Data Integration Basics, where we will be focusing on merging and joining. I'm joined by the lovely Javita and Sarah here today. I'll pass things over to Javita to give an intro to herself.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're joining from. My name is Javita Chan. I'm a technical support specialist on the form side. Work with Sarah. We're on different teams, but we still work together, which is awesome. Pass it over to Sarah.
Hi everyone, good day to you wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Sarah, and like Javita said, I'm also a technical support specialist working primarily with form. Pass it back to you, Elizabeth.
Perfect, thanks both. And I'll also note we have Evie on the back end joining us today, and she is ready and eager to answer any questions you might have during the webinar. So please do leave those in the questions tab on the bottom right. I believe it'll show on the next screen here. Yep. So the bottom right, if you have any questions during the webinar, and then we'll also have a Q&A period at the end. Keep letting us know where you're tuning in from the chat on the bottom right. Yeah, and share your emoji reactions with us on the bottom middle, as I see some people already doing throughout the webinar there. And then we do have a poll coming up, so keep an eye on the polls tab for that. And lastly, I'll just note, if you do have any audio or video issues during the webinar, please click that help button on the bottom left. The first step is just to refresh your browser there. All right, and I'll pass things back over to the team to take us through the intro here.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So just to kick us off here, we all live in a world of data. And so you might find that sometimes your data can't integrate or work with kind of the formats that you want to, because they're in different places, or it might just be difficult to translate from one to the other, even convert them to a totally different format. So today we want to show you how you can merge data that might come from really diverse formats or systems, and how to create a more enriched output with them. So our examples today will mostly be tabular, but there's of course so much possibility for more in FME, as you'll soon see. So we have a poll to kick things off here. We want to know what your biggest challenge is when it comes to merging and joining data. So head over to the polls tab and cast your vote.
Yeah, it'll be good to gauge this from folks. I noted, select your top 1 to 2. You might have a couple there that resonate. Give everyone a moment. All right, it looks like there are a couple in the lead here. So far, ensuring data accuracy and consistency and dealing with different data formats. So yeah, we'll definitely be sure to address how you can overcome those today. Thanks everyone for voting. At this point, I'll get our presenters to turn off their webcams just so we can save on some bandwidth as we head into the rest of the webinar here. All right, and I'll pass things back over to Sarah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks everyone for participating in that poll there. This is really good for us to know. So merging and joining are pretty straightforward to do, and we really want to make sure that FME is the one doing the heavy lifting and not yourself doing kind of the manual work. You'll soon see there are lots of ways to merge and join. Each one has pros and cons, which we'll speak to as well. And we're just hoping to show you all kinds of tools so that you can choose the one that works best for you in your workflows today. On our agenda for today, I'm going to start us off with a flash demo to showcase FME and just introduce the platform a little bit. After that, we're going to dive into the feature joiner, feature merger, and database joiner and how those can be used. Then I'll hand things over to Javita, and she's going to take you through the inline querier, the SQL executor, and the SQL creator. And finally, we're going to finish this webinar off with some resources and Q&A at the very end. And with that, let's jump into that flash demo. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so this is the FME interface if you've never seen it before. This middle part here is the canvas where we're going to do our work. And to start us off, I'm going to add a PostGIS reader to bring my data into FME. So normally this is where you'd specify your data set. I have this one set up already. I have a pre-existing database connection to this training database that we have. And I have just pulled in the City of Surrey property lots data set. And then hit OK on that. And once our data is in FME, we can click up here to view it, and that pops open our visual preview window down here. And here you can see our attributes and our geometry side by side. Of course, if you click one, it kind of pulls up the corresponding record, so very easy to use. And everything looks good here. We have our ID numbers and our zone code and area, which are all things we want. We're also going to add in some CSV data to join with this data set. So another way you can add data to FME is simply by dragging and dropping it in from your computer. And FME is smart enough to detect what format it is. So this is a CSV. Go ahead and click OK on that. And let's just do a check to make sure that it's what we expect. So that looks good. This CSV has descriptions of what each of these zone codes mean, and we want to join that with our lots data set up here. So now to actually do that and to actually do things with our data, we're going to use transformers. And so we're going to use a feature joiner to do this. So I'll go ahead and add that in there. We're going to go into the feature joiner a lot more in this webinar, but for now, I'm literally just going to drag and connect them together. And I'll go in and set it up. So we want zone code for each of these. Now to trigger the transformation, I'm going to hit this big green play button up here, and you'll be able to see the features moving through. So it looks like 40 of the zone codes in the CSV didn't find a match, but it looks like all the lot attributes did, which is the important part anyways. That's great. These green eyeball squares that have popped up, these are called feature caches, and they're how you can view your data at every stage of the transformation. So if I go ahead and click on this, we can see the merged data set with the zone description. And this is just a really great tool for troubleshooting while you're kind of building out your workflow. So next, we're going to add another transformer to do some attribute manager, and we're going to do that using an attribute manager. It's down here, and once again, I'm just going to connect that and go in. We don't need anything except for the ID, the area, and the description. So I'm just going to remove all the rest of these attributes, hit run on that. And you can see now we're only left with the 3 attributes that we're interested in. So last, we're going to want to export this or basically write it out. And to do that, we're going to use a writer. We want this to be in Excel format, so we're going to add an Excel writer to our canvas. And I'm just going to choose this results spreadsheet that I had set up already. But you can always create a new spreadsheet from FME as well. It's really easy to do that. Go ahead and add that in there. And we'll just click run on this. Translation was successful, and now we can take a look at what we ended up with. And this was our end Excel sheet with just the 3 attributes that we had after we had merged the zone description. So that was our flash demo. Hopefully you have a better idea of how FME works now if you're new here. If not, don't worry, we have tons of training and resources on our site and the FME Academy as well. And those are all free to access once you sign up. We'll also have some more resources for you throughout and at the end of this webinar as well. So back to our presentation here, I'm just going to take a quick moment here to introduce our FME platform. So FME Form is the no-code authoring environment where you build your workflows, and it is the base product that you'll need to do your FME work. It's kind of where everyone starts, and we just saw that in action during the flash demo, so that's what that was. You can feel free to just stick with FME Form, and that would still give you so much power and flexibility to create reusable data transformations, or you can take things to the next level in FME Flow. So FME Flow is the part of the platform that you can use to automate your form workflows. You can run them based on schedules or a bunch of other triggers, and this can be deployed on premises or in your private cloud. FME Flow hosted is the same thing as FME Flow functionality-wise, but it is deployed in SAFE's fully hosted AWS cloud environment. So you have a ton of different ways that you can deploy the FME platform. Here's just a little graph that shows where we started as a company and where we're going with our formats. So we started in the CAD and GIS space, and we're actually still very strong in these areas today. They are still two of our most popular topics, but we're always learning and growing, and lately we've been developing FME in the generative AI and cloud native spaces. And of course, we're very dedicated to improving how we can bring in all this diverse data and have them work together nicely. This is just an example that we pulled from one of our BIM webinars. In this one, we took Revit data and merged it with data from IBM's Tririga product, and it all ended up in a third product in ArcGIS Indoors. So it kind of just goes to show you that your data can come from very different places and still work together really nicely. All right, now I'll hand things over to Javita. She's going to take us into merging and joining data.
Thank you, Sarah, for a wonderful introduction, as well to the FME platform and to just getting started with FME for anyone who's new to seeing FME for the first time. So, introduction to merging and joining. You have joined a webinar for merging and joining, but what do we mean by that? So when we talk about merging or joining data, we're talking about two data sets being merged together and combined based on a common ID or column in order to output a single data set. And this is different from simply appending data to make it a longer data set. What do we mean by that? So we're going to have these nifty charts here. On the left side, we are appending or creating a union. And that means that we've got two data sets with the same schema, and we're creating a longer data set. So from the two at the top, you see A, B, C, and D. And we end up with a data set with 6 output rows aside. Instead of having a richer data set, we have a longer data set. So what that looks like in FME means that if you had two readers or two reader feature types, let's say veggies and fruit, they've got the same schema, so they each have item, quantity, and cost. Our output would be produce with item, quantity, and cost. So we get this one data set that's just a little bit longer that combines these two data sets in an append. What we're focusing on in this webinar today is merging or joining on the right side. So we have those tables again, A, B, and C. And the table below that we're merging with is C, D, and E. Our common column is column C. So when they're merged together, we end up with the same 3 rows of data, but we have a data set that has attributes from A all the way through to E. In FME, what that looks like is if we had produce and source. So they've got different schemas, item, quantity, and cost. And item is the common kind of C column here. So if we just hook up the produce to the produce details, we get item, quantity, and cost. But if we also connect the source, then we end up with a richer data set, including the source information. So get produce details. And that'll be our focus for today. Hope it didn't make anyone hungry there. So very popular topic, selecting a transformer. I know we have a vast number of transformers, so today we're looking at merging and joining data and the types of transformers you might use or consider for your workflows. So there are 2 main categories in terms of selecting a transformer for your joining and merging needs. It's whether you would like to use SQL or you would like to not use SQL. On the left-hand side, SQL transformers include things like the inline querier, the SQL creator, and the SQL executor. And on the right side, you have choices like the feature joiner or merger, and the feature reader and database joiner. If it's kind of hard to get started, we have this really nifty chart that Liz had put together in terms of having a flow chart. And in that red space there, kind of in the middle on the left column is a start here. It's like where you are on this map. And you can ask yourself 3 different questions. Your first question would be, is all my data already in the workspace? Have I already put in the reader and read in my data? If so, then you can use something like the feature joiner. going up towards the internal kind of internal path. And if it's no, your data is not loaded, it's currently in a database, then you might want to use something like the database joiner. Your next question might be to ask if the feature joiner or the database joiner work for your data. If yes, then you're great to go from there. Alternatives you can use are the feature merger or the feature reader, depending on what you need. And then finally, in that green column, you can ask yourself, do I want to use SQL? If you do, then you might have choices like the inline querier or the SQL creator or executor. So this is in our knowledge base article, so you'll be able to check this anytime later, and you'll also get the slides, so you have the link to it. With that, I'll pass it back over to Sarah.
All right, thanks, Javita. And with that, we're going to jump right into our first demo here. We're going to take a look at how the feature joiner and feature merger can be used to combine a bunch of data sets together. And just to start us off, we have some water meter information up here. We're going to take a look at that. So we've got some water meter information with ID numbers and all the associated information that we want. We also have some lots information, zone code lookup, and addresses. And we want to join these three data sets to the water meter data sets to give us a more enriched version of the water meter data set. This report will be used by field inspectors at the city's municipal inspection programs. So we want to make sure that all the information that they get is going to be helpful to them. So we're just going to compare this water meters data set to our output. So you can see it's got a lot more information in here, including some zone descriptions and addresses, which the original data set didn't have. So the first thing we'll want to do is join this water meters data set with this lots data. And I'll just zoom us in here so we can see a bit better. And to do that, we're going to use a feature joiner doing a one-to-many join, or many-to-one, my apologies. So this table has the zone code lookup, and we want to attach the appropriate water meter to the appropriate zone code. So let's take a closer look at this feature joiner. So join mode up here is where you can choose the type of join that you'd like to do. It could be inner, left, or full. If you're not sure what all these mean, you can click on this help button down here to pull up the documentation. All of our readers, writers, and transformers have this button, so you can always pull up the documentation really easily. And if we scroll down, you can kind of see it's got like a visual description of what these all mean, as well as a lot more information about this transformer and how to use it. So we want a left join today to retain the water meter features regardless of whether there's a match with the lots or not. Attribute conflict resolution tells the transformer which feature to use in case of a conflict. And once again, we'll want the water meter attributes to go through in this case. That's our left. Same thing with geometry handling. We're going to leave it as left to retain the water meter geometry. So join on is the important part here, and this is where we specify the join keys. So here you'd want to choose attributes from each data set that are the same so that all the other attributes can be joined together on that basis. You can also add multiple attributes here. There's lots of space on these rows. This can be helpful if you don't have one single clear unique attribute or unique ID to match on. So if we inspect our output here, you can see that our zone code has been joined to our water meters data set. And the next one we want to join here is our zone code lookup. So this data set contains descriptions of the zone code so that our field workers know what each one means. And we're going to join that in the same way that we joined the lots data set. This time we're going to use zone code as the join key. So just to take a look at that output, you can see now we have zone description added in here. And moving on to our third and final feature joiner, the last data set we're going to be joining is this address data set. As you might have guessed, it contains address information of each of these lots. So it's got the house number, street, postal code, and parcel ID that they correspond to. So for this last join, we're going to be doing an inner join so that only features that have a match from both the left and the right data sets can go through. And at the end here, we're going to create two separate Excel reports. So one of them contains the water meter features with the addresses associated with them, and the other one has the water meter features that didn't find a matching address. So just to recap what we saw, we started with 4 data sets that came from different places and in a different format, and we merged them all together using multiple joins and ended up with a report that was supplemented with all these extra data sets that we had. For part 2 of this demo, I'm just going to take us down here, and we'll need our address reader as well. We're going to be talking about one-to-many joins as well as the feature merger, which is down here. So this time we want to add some additional property details to the address data set. So the property details data set has some extra information we want, such as folio number, and we can do that using a one-to-many join. So I'm going to add our address data set here. So this, we're going to use the feature joiner for this and doing a one-to-many join because there can be multiple properties on one address. Think of townhouses, apartments, places like that. So this feature joiner will output separate address features for each match in the property address or property details table. So as you can see, we end up with 13,000 address features. And here the feature joiner has created separate address features for each match that it encounters. So you can see that it's all been joined together with the property details table. Taking a look at the feature merger now, I'm going to connect the address data set down here as well. So this one is going to generate one feature per address regardless of the number of matching addresses. So here we just want a list of the folio numbers from the address, from the property details data set for each address record. So inside the feature merger, you can see that we've already specified the join on. It's going to be the property ID. We want to make sure that process duplicate suppliers is enabled as well as generate list. And this is just going to put all the folio numbers into a list called folios. Here's our folios column. And if we open up, I'm going to search up this number and take a look at this attribute that we have here. And if we open up the property or feature information window up here and I scroll down, you can see that there are now 2 folio numbers attached to this one attribute. Last but not least, this list concatenator is going to expose these lists and concatenate them so that all the folio numbers are listed in one attribute. So if we open that feature cache up and we look up the same number, scroll to the end here, you can see that there are now 2 folio numbers in this one feature. So that was our demo, and we're going to go back to our slides here. So just to recap that, here are just the various join modes one more time. This table also tells you what features will come out of each output port on the feature joiner. And once again, you can find all this information and more in the documentation for the feature joiner. The feature merger can generate lists to capture multiple matches. We also have a tutorial linked here on working with list attributes, so definitely give that a look if you're new to working with list attributes or if you just want a refresher. So just to summarize feature joins versus feature mergers, the feature joiner supports multiple matches per record by default, and the feature joiner is often the simpler and faster transformer to use, not to mention probably the easiest one to work with. So for that reason, we often recommend starting with this transformer if you're looking to do a join. The feature merger, on the other hand, can merge multiple suppliers to a single requester by creating a list of matches, and it can also create lists of your matches. All right, let's take a look at the database joiner now. All right, so this demo probably looks really familiar. It's actually the same thing as the previous one, but now we're going to take a look at how the database joiner can replace one of our transformers here. So the database joiner lets you connect to and join a database table straight from the transformer itself. So we can use that to replace the second feature joiner where we had merged that zone code lookup table to our water meter report. I'm just going to go ahead and remove that, and we're going to join our database joiner in there instead. And we're not going to reconnect our zone code lookup here because we're going to call upon that in the database joiner itself. So with this, we can connect to any database format as well as Excel and CSV. Just to show you kind of the list of formats here that you can connect to using this transformer. It's definitely a bit more of a limited selection than our general readers, but this is a specialized transformer, so you only have access to a select number of formats here. So we want to use an Excel sheet as our lookup table, and I have that set up here. And once again, we're going to have to specify a matching key. So we're going to use zone code as our common attribute. One really cool thing you can do in here is control the attributes that you want to bring into the workspace. So with our other joining transformers, you have to bring in the entire set of attributes by default. But with this one, you can choose only the fields that you're interested in. So out of these four, we only needed zone description, so we only read in zone description. Setting cardinality is also pretty straightforward. We want must match 0 or 1 here, but there's a couple options to choose from. Further down here, we have accumulation mode and conflict resolution. So accumulation mode lets you dictate how the attributes are merged, whether you want them combined or if you want to tack on a prefix. Conflict resolution is where you can specify which attribute to use if there's a conflict. Last but not least, hidden down here is our little optimize section. This is grayed out right now because we're reading in Excel, but it does get enabled if you choose a database format. So this lets you prefetch the query so that you can let the underlying database do the querying work to just bring in a subset of the data before it even reaches FME. So it's just a bit of a nice little performance enhancer, and it just lets the database and the transformer do the work without having to add an extra transformer or two to your workspace. So we open that up and take a look. Just like in that previous workspace, you can see that zone description has been added into our water meter records. And this is just another option to use in your workspaces. It's really great for doing quick lookups if you're working with databases, Excel, or CSV. So just to recap, Database Joiner gives you the ability to bring in a database midstream into your existing workflow. Do feel free to check out the documentation for this if you're interested in learning a little more about it. And just to compare this to the feature merger and feature joiner that we saw in the previous demo, the database joiner is what we call a non-blocking transformer. And this just means that the data that's coming in is joined and gets processed as each feature rolls into the transformer. So if you're looking to bring in a couple of attributes from a large table or a database to join with your data, then this one would be a really great one to use to do that. The feature merger and feature joiner, on the other hand, those are what we call blocking transformers. So they're going to wait until all the features have been received before processing them. So these two transformers can connect to all FME readers. So for more generic use cases, they will probably be your best bet. Bit of a bonus transformer for you all. The attribute value mapper is similar to the database joiner in that it introduces a lookup table to your workflow, but instead of pulling out an existing one externally, you can create or import one into the transformer. So that means that your lookup table is going to be saved in this transformer in the workspace, and if you want to make changes, you'll have to go back to this one specific transformer in that specific workspace. So this is a really good one for one-to-one lookups. And if you're sure that nothing will really change, then this is a fast transformer and another good option to consider. Another midstream join option is the feature reader. And this is a special transformer that acts like a regular reader, except you can add it midstream in your workflow. So it's kind of like a way of sneaking in data of any format into your data stream. And we typically see this transformer used for spatial joins, but you can also perform tabular joins with it. In the feature reader, you can create a where clause, and that just lets you associate the attributes that are being newly read in with the attributes that were already in your workspace. So you can also merge them together by setting your accumulation mode to merge initiator and result. And just to compare that to the database joiner, both of these read in and join data midstream in your transformation. The database joiner lets you join in database formats as well as Excel and CSV, while the feature reader lets you join in formats with an inner join only. All right, so now I'm going to hand things over to Javita.
Thank you, Sarah. So lots of transformers going by. Quick recap, feature joiner and feature merger are great places to start. Nothing wrong with using it. You may use one or two more depending on how many data sets you're merging. Database joiner, you are adding an external database into your workspace and just grabbing from there in order to continue running through your workspace. Now we're going to look at the SQL side transformers. We're going to look at the inline querier first. And as a quick recap, kind of comparison, your feature joiner already has the data loaded. So does the inline querier. So you've already got your readers in there, and you're working with data that's accessible to your workspace. Inline querier uses SQL, so it's great if you love using SQL. And the other thing, there was a really great question in the chat or in the questions panel by John asking about when is it wrong, or is there ever time that it's wrong to use SQL? And the answer is not really. If you're comfortable with SQL, do use it, but there will be times like in the inline querier, because we are creating a temporary SQLite database, that you're going to want to make sure that what you're doing, the number of joins you're doing, is worth it and worth the overhead. So with the inline querier, what's really cool about it is that you can have multiple queries in a single transformer. So you're going to see, well, you're going to see the workspace in a second. So move over, feature joiner. The inline querier allows you to use it against any data source, uses the power of SQL with multiple queries, and it also includes spatial if you have spatial columns. So I believe this slide takes us into the workspace. As I search for the correct window here. All right, same workspace. If you joined late, our sources are water meters and lots. We have our zone code lookup as well as our city center addresses in CSV. And finally, in Postgres, we've got our property details. So I've got multiple sources going on here. I've got my file geodatabase, my Excel, CSV, and Postgres. And now you can see I only have one transformer, which is the inline querier. And it's doing all of those different joins, 3 different SQL queries here. On my left side, I've got the table information. This aligns with my source inputs. And then I've got my query columns, which are the attributes inside these source inputs. And then my 3 SQL statements. So if I take a peek at the first one, you can see my SQL joins. There's 3 different joins happening here on different common IDs. And let's take a look at how this actually works. So if I wanted to work with the inline querier, I'm going to type just directly into the canvas inline. I'm going to hit enter, and this will add my transformer to my workspace. And this is one of those dynamic input transformers. As you can see, that connect input. I'm going to connect my water meters and my lot. And we'll open that up. Got water meters and lot. I'm just going to name my output port join as an example. And we'll go into the SQL query. So there's lots of tools in here to assist you in creating SQL, including all of our query columns or attributes, as well as our tables. If I go ahead and right click on anything, there are these quick kind of shortcuts. So I can script a select. Well, I'll start with a left join. I'll remove this. Left join on lot. On name this one L. On w.pid, and I can double click so to make sure that I get the correct query column where L is the same as PID. Oops, not parcel description. PID. So I could go ahead and run this, or if anybody is interested in getting to SQL, needs a refresher on SQL syntax, like I totally did, there's this beautiful tool here for AI Assist, and you can type in natural language in here. So for example, I would like to join lot to water meters such that I keep, typing in front of an audience is always very difficult. Join lot such that I keep all of water meters on PID. Yeah, typing spelling in front or like writing on a whiteboard anytime. So I've hit generate right now and it was an invalid prompt. I always forget to hit the checkbox for send database schema to AI. It does a lot better of a job being able to view what your schema looks like so it can give you something more accurate. And while it's generating, I'll also mention that my favorite kind of part of this is the explanation, because if you are not familiar with SQL, you may not be able to parse it the same way. And so having that explanation just gives you a little bit more. So it's suggesting that I do a select distinct, which I find AI really likes to use distinct, from water meters, left join on water meters. That's close enough. I don't think I'll use this one. I had a better prompt earlier, but because I am doing this live, probably should have saved it. So we'll go with my original one, and we'll go ahead and hit run. I'm just going to hit run on everything while I'm at this. And we come back to kind of the performance question on when to use SQL. So because this is doing 3 different joins, it's kind of worth the overhead. It takes a little bit longer than you'll have noticed for like the featured joiner or the database joiner. And you'll notice this for the SQL executor and creator as well in a moment. But it's not too bad in terms of timing, and it really depends on how much you're doing with SQL and in the inline query. So if that kind of timing is acceptable for you, like this saves you a lot of different transformers happening in your workspace, but you also want to consider if you are sharing this workspace with other users, or if one day you might pass this workspace on to a colleague, do they have the SQL knowledge in order to be able to edit this and understand what's happening? So that's kind of another consideration, is shareability. FME is really big about no code, and it's really great because it means it's very shareable and it lowers the barrier to kind of understanding what's happening in the workflow. So that's possibly a consideration for you when you use SQL. So we have run. You can see that we've joined our information. Really, all I wanted from lot was the zone code. Can I see it? Zone code here. So in terms of performance saving and tips for using the inline querier, similar to how Sarah in the database joiner mentioned she was only joining for the zone codes, we can actually remove everything outside of, I'm just going to remove this. And then all the way to here, I want to keep PID because that's what we're joining on. And so because we are loading a temporary SQLite database, what this does is that generally we would index all of these query columns before processing the SQL query. So if you wanted to save processing time, only keeping what you need will save you that processing power. So if I go back into the query now, you notice lots is a lot shorter, and we've got this lot.fme feature content. I know it's a little bit small. And this would happen for anything that you've removed in the query columns, and it's a blob value that stores all of the attributes that you had just removed. So if, for example, I use a SQL query, let's say select all from lots, everything that I had removed will come back in my output. So that's the inline querier. I believe that's everything I wanted to mention there, and we'll head back into the slides. So once again, the inline querier loads a SQLite database. So you want to make sure it's worth it when you do consolidate all your queries into one, and it's really fast once it's loaded. Don't use it for simple tasks like filtering or where you can use the attribute value mapper, because then the overhead of creating that SQLite database isn't really worth it, and you'll save more time using the attribute value mapper, for example. And then the smart configuration in removing the query columns that you don't need will save you a lot of time as well. So here's a comparison of the inline querier and the next two that we're going to talk about, which are the SQL executor and creator. The inline querier uses any data source, and it takes multiple inputs, as you saw, as well as creating multiple queries. So that's really nice to be able to use that with lots of different tables and making multiple queries. The SQL executor and creator are very, very similar. The only difference is that one kicks off by itself, the SQL creator, similar to a creator transformer, and the SQL executor requires a input. So for example, a creator in order to kick off the transformer. And what they can do is they can execute SQL against your own database. And it's only one database, but it lets the database do the work. So FME isn't the one that's actually processing it. And then I think that's all I wanted to mention with that. So it does need a database, the SQL executor and creator, and it still uses the power of SQL. It still includes spatial, so if you have any spatial columns, and you can use any SQL. So I forgot to mention the inline querier uses the SQLite flavor of SQL because it loads that temporary SQL database. With a SQL executor and SQL creator, you're using the flavor of SQL native to your underlying database, if that makes sense. So if you have an Oracle database, you want to use Oracle SQL, Postgres, and any other database that requires specific SQL syntax. And when we say you can use SQL in it, you can use any SQL in it. You can select data, you can create things, you can drop tables. So do be careful. If you're using the SQL executor and creator, you want to be quite comfortable with SQL, or to be able to do it in a test environment. And we will head into our next demo here. So we have a few more transformers again, not quite like the inline querier, but still very powerful. And as I mentioned, the SQL executor, we've got two of them on the workspace, is kicked off by the creator. It's really just initializing the workspace. And the SQL creator on the bottom left is standalone because it creates that feature on its own. Let's take a peek at SQL executor 3. And it has my database connection, the SQL statement. We've got 3 different joins happening here with this delimiter as well, just to let it know where the query ends. Same deal as the inline querier. We've got our database tables. Probably want to filter it down to the actual ones I'm using here. So for example, lot has all of this information. Right-click it, and you've got lots of different shortcuts to drop, create, select, truncate. We still have AI Assist, which is nice to have. And I think the other thing I had wanted to mention, let's look at the SQL creator first. Same deal, almost exactly the same. But something really neat about the creator, this was something I actually hadn't known until I'd taken a closer look into this. But if you right-click on the SQL creator, there's this set creator runtime order. So it's like third from the bottom. And you can actually order which starts. So right now, if I were to hit run, I believe the first creator starts off first. Let me zoom out a little bit here. We can restart that, rerun entire workspace. So this creator actually starts off first, but with that runtime order, if the order matters to you what writes first or what executes first, you can actually modify that runtime order by moving the SQL creator up. So that will save you just like a fun trick. I believe that was everything I wanted to show in the SQL executor. And we're creating these same reports, our water meter reports here. Nothing too new. Head back into the slides. So tips for using the SQL executor and the SQL creator, similar to the database joiner, you let your database do the work for you. So it's doing all of that selecting and filtering of information to bring into FME what you need without FME processing it. And you can use SQL of any complexity, but you're only connecting to the one database. There was one more thing that I wanted to mention, which was to do with the attribute exposer. In the recent years, we had added importing from feature cache. So in the past, it was a little bit hard to know which attributes to expose. But now, once you have run the workspace and gotten those green kind of eyeball icons on your transformers, you can now go into import from feature cache, and select all of the attributes you'd like to keep or would like to expose. And that will output that for you into the table in the visual previewer. In the past, this workspace actually hard-coded what was exposed on the writer feature type. So that's also another method to say that whatever's incoming, whatever changes, I would like to keep the schema. So that's another way to do it. If you're interested in preserving your output schema, we have another webinar called Schema Drift, I believe, that talks about specifically about your inputs changing or the schema is changing and how to preserve your expected schema on your output. We'll link that out later. So a quick plug on automating. We've mostly talked about FME form this whole time. So a quick look at FME flow, which really lets you automate. It means you don't have to hit run on the workspace. So let's take a peek at that. I have this nifty FME flow app, workspace app, and it's really just the last workspace I'd shown. So this is the same workspace published into FME flow, and it's a data download service. So what's happening is in the background, it's running this workspace. I'm going to hit run, and it should provide me with a link to download the reports. So there's my zip file, and this is a link that I could share with anyone in my company, for example. You can restrict that to whoever you want to send it to, but basically allows for self-serve data and just really great to work with. So FME flow is something you may want to consider. Lots of resources as well to work with it. And with that, I will pass it over to Sarah.
Thanks. Right, so just to wrap things up a little bit here, today we saw many options for merging and joining, and we really hope that by choosing the right transformer, you will be able to merge and join your data more efficiently. You can choose your transform based on the data that you're working with. So if you're working with some really diverse data sets, you'll probably want to use the feature joiner or the inline querier. If your data is in a database, then the SQL executor or SQL creator would be good ones to start with. And there are some other options if you're comfortable with SQL as well. For quick lookup tables, we have the database joiner and the feature reader. And if you're not sure at all where to begin, because this is a whole lot of new information, start with the feature joiner and go from there. You can always change things later on, and the feature joiner itself is a pretty powerful transformer. You might just need that one. We have a couple more resources for you here. These are just links to articles and tutorials related to kind of everything that we've spoken about today if you wanted to dive a little deeper into merging and joining in FME. If you'd like more, or if you're curious about other topics, support.safe.com is our support center where you can get resources on anything related to FME. And I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth now to kind of conclude the resources and presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. So just some resources to help you get started in general with FME. We do have a lot of great guided learning at your fingertips through our FME Academy and our knowledge base as well. Lots of how-tos and demos there. We also have an ebook available free of charge, a short link there if you'd like to check it out. And lastly, I just want to highlight on this slide here our webinar program. Lots of upcoming webinars as well as many hundreds on demand. So feel free to head on over to that on demand tab and search by the topic you might be looking to learn more about. We also have a podcast program that we've introduced in the last couple of years here. So it's hosted through EM360. And yeah, if you're looking for more audio-based learning, definitely check those out. In terms of next steps, please do contact us to get in touch about anything data. We'd love to help you solve any data challenges, info@safe.com. And then also our FME Accelerator course. It's a free course, 90 minutes, and it's a great place to get started with the basics of FME. Claim your community badge. Here's today's code if you're a member of our FME community, and I will drop that in the chat now as well. If you aren't yet a part of our FME community, we encourage you to take a look. It's a great place to network with other users as well as gain any advice or answers to your questions from experts. All right, and with that, I will invite our presenters on stage and we can take a look at the questions panel here together. And Evie as well, you're welcome to join if you'd like. Awesome. Yeah, I saw a shout out to Evie in the chat as well. Thank you, Evie, for your help getting through so many questions today.
Yeah, I also noticed that comment. Great job, Evie.
Good job, Evie.
We're such a nice audience.
Best audience in the world, honestly.
Were there any questions that stood out to you, Evie? Not to put you on the spot.
Oh yeah, I think the one-to-many, going over that was interesting. I don't think we really emphasized that. If you want to talk more about that.
So one-to-many joins, something you can do in FMA, just a lot of flexibility with that. And that's if you have kind of one set of data and another set of data that you might have several attributes that you want to join to that. So sometimes you might need to do that. And I think the feature merger tends to be a little bit better with that. But once again, the feature joiner might get you there as well.
I think to add to that, I was just recalling as you were talking about it, there are some transformers that will create lists when there are many to one matches, and it'll be like a list on the one. And you'll want to check the feature information. So if you've created a one-to-many join and you're wondering, where are my features? Like, check the feature information window and see if there is a list. You may just need to use a list exploder for that, and that will explode it out into attributes. Other transformers may, I'm struggling to remember which one it was, but will create all of the different separate rows for all of those joins. And I think the inline querier is one of them. If you had seen how many output records or how output features there were in relation to how many inputs there were. So that's one example.
There's a new question that just came in from Jesse. I don't know if you want to answer that one as well. About, it's more broad. As FME professionals, what is the most powerful workflow or application that you have discovered in our careers? Does anyone have an answer to that first?
I have one in mind. I have talked with some customers before where I had the chance to visit them, and it was kind of neat to hear from them that there was a kind of a chokehold in their process or bottleneck where somebody had to go and approve something in order for the next person to get the data they needed. So similar to the FME Flow app I showed, kind of like a digital plan submission sort of idea, I think being able to make that automated so that nobody has to go and like check something and approve it in order for somebody to get to their data, as well as be able to send it back if it doesn't meet requirements, is really powerful and saves a lot of time. So I think that is kind of one that I would think of that uses both FME form and FME flow that really allows people to remove kind of that dead space process that people have to wait for in order to get their data.
I think my answer to that is it's not necessarily the most powerful, but one that we use internally on the experts team every single day is we have a FME form and flow workspace that runs every single morning, and it brings up all the FME community questions that maybe are new or need a bit more attention, and that just kind of brings it to our attention so we can kind of go and address those and try to get as many questions answered as we can. So that one's always been a really reliable one and a really great one for us to kind of keep our eyes on the community and to make sure that people are getting answers.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I don't know about most powerful or useful application, but I love all of the different like fun applications that you can come up with FME. There's lots of different things you can do. I've I've participated in multiple projects that were just for fun with FME, and there's some articles floating around that you can look up. But I think just finding that all of the different things that you can do with FME is really cool.
I'll take it back to feature merging and joining. There's a question from Kevin about similar workflow that they have with water meter datasets and what we would suggest in performing a similar operation that writes back to the same feature class instead of a new dataset. Thought that was really interesting. Evie, did you want to share what you had written first?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to confirm that depending on the format as well, you might need to add the new columns, if you're adding new columns, to the data set first, depending on the format, of course. But then it would just be an update operation, I think. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I would add that the change detection or change detector might be a useful tool for that, just to make sure that you're not adding the same records into your existing feature class. And when you do that update operation, similar to joining data, you'll be looking at not exactly a common ID, but like a attribute to update on that will verify that you're not writing the same thing into it and that it's really an update. Sarah, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I was going to bring up the change detector as well, so you covered it.
Awesome. We do have a minute or so left here. Is there any other questions we want to highlight on the stage before we wrap up? I think we've gotten to them all now. No, I think we're all good. All right, I will just note that if you do have a question that comes to mind, we'll hang online on the back end for a couple minutes longer after we wrap up here today in case any new questions do come in. And if we aren't able to get to a question, just know that we will follow up via email as well. All right, so with that, I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate it, as well as a big round of applause to Sarah and Javita for all their work on creating the content that was shared with us today, and Evie for her work on the questions panel as well. If you do have a brief moment to fill out our webinar survey, we really appreciate any feedback. It helps us improve upon our program. And with that, I will wish you all a great rest of your days ahead, and bye for now.